Hello and most welcome to 786. I will today talk about if the universe could be a fractal or could be governed by fractals. The idea struck me then with this usual dichotomy, with the usual dichotomies that we see and experience with subject and object. We sort of shut off possibility of a wider, more comprehensive knowledge that could take into concern things that are most pertinent to how we understand the world and what we can do with the world. And one thing that actually struck me is what we former talked about, fractals and chaos theory. Chaos theory shows us that there is a higher order of things and that the world from the foundation is fractal. It's not constructed according to the coordinate system with the perpendicular lines going vertical, horizontal and diagonal. And what could happen if we don't sort of penetrate these barriers that have been constructed during the ages between subject and object, and also this very present idea of space as an empty container for things, and absolutely rigid and stable so that it can serve as a coordinate system for things to be related to each other and to the original start, the origo. All these things sort of stop the possibility to have a flowing, chaotic system, to have knowledge, to have understanding. And this is something we brought up earlier together with Alan Bloom, who shows that knowledge is seen to be a thing of the past. We just sort of ad hoc construct knowledge. We use a difficult language to say that this is something particular or interesting, but in reality they're just sheer platitudes working on the idea of a subject and an object order, thereby constructing a polarity. And the last thing is, this is how truth is constructed somehow, a truth that takes its foundation, what is untrue. So you see, it doesn't have much value in reality. And the opposite of this is, of course, the rather flaccid and superficial postmodernism that says there is no knowledge possible. And they say that because they observe this ludicrousy in the ordinary knowledge that is just completely dependent on its opposite. In the game of opposition there can be no truth. That's what they seem to be saying. And actually, in a matter of way, they are completely correct. And let me point a finger here to Daniel Dennett and Steven Pinker, because they try to defend rationality when it's actually they who try to found a rationality only based on opposites. It won't work. Reality is not constructed from opposites. Why would it? It's like complete ridiculous. Who said that reality is the difference between empty space and things? It doesn't hold. It hasn't told for a good time. But the thing is, still in literature, intellectual endeavor, we are imitating this ludicrous game that doesn't lead anywhere. leads away from reality, and it becomes in the end absurdly shallow. And of course this is the reason for the closing of the American mind. And I'd say not only the closing of the American mind, but the closing of the Western mind. People are trying to salvage the sinking wreck by renaming things. I think Callie gave me some renaming options for the idea of the origin. The origin takes its force from being not a copy, that's original. And now it's called, I think it was renamed primary source or something like that. I bet you it still is taking all its reality from its opposite, the primary not being the secondary. It's fun for a while doing this opposition game, but of course it becomes incredibly shallow in the end, jumping from one opposition to the other and sort of founding the truth somehow in this. I don't know, it's two parts of the modern talk, the postmodernists or the general postmodernism. I really want to exclude Derrida from this accusation coming from Jordan Peterson, also Sam Harris. I think it's completely ludicrous. It's a game, and of course fractals and chaos theory shows us there is a foundation for truth. There is something that is truth, and there is some things that are definite. And because of our misguided idea about seeking the foundations for truth, epistemology, such things, that has in itself undermined the little truth that was before. So I would say that fractals could be something that open up thinking in a way that makes it broader, more accepting, comprehensive. It takes in so many connections, it doesn't decide as its foundation what is the inside. It doesn't say that it's the subject that holds knowledge of the objective world or something like that. Making all these usually very long causal chains to explain how you know something, and this time lapse that's never explained. Why it, of course it takes time. First you have to perceive, and light has to come into the eyes, and there is a delay towards the world, so you're almost a couple of milliseconds late to your own world. How could that make sense? How can you be late to your own perception? And how could somebody think that light coming into the eyes, that's reality? There's so many reasons against that idea, so not even words for it. The paradox of the homunculus is one thing, but another thing is that you only look sharply at a little place of your panoramic vision. A little shape is not bigger than this. That's the only one that's clear. That's the only way you can actually say that here is light coming in and it's put into focus. The rest is a construction actually. So there's no light coming in that way. What I see around me here when I sit here at this library, it's not something coming into my eye, it's a construct from my own consciousness. And when you look at the screen, I'm pointing at it now, your eyes are not perceiving the whole screen, perceiving a portion of it. The rest is a construction, a necessary construction, and that is reality as well. So I think shutting out of knowledge is the most difficult thing, and this is of course what Alan Bloom is what Adam Bloom is doing is complaining, but by the time he wrote the book, it was already even too late to complain. It was obvious that knowledge is something of the past. We don't learn the old canonical works of past. We invent as we go along, and of course that's going to stick in the eyes of somebody with Adam Bloom. But this is not things that are necessary, because we have much better, so to say, models for knowledge these days. And fractals is a very good pointer. Fractal shows there is not such a thing as a straight line anywhere in the universe. Never have existed, can't exist on a piece of paper, cannot even be imagined. It's shutting off of realization how reality looks like. So to speak, if you have this idea of perpendicular lines x, y, z in your mind, you will blank out reality, because reality, as I said, is sort of a construct, but that construct will be bothered by an idea of empty space. It will be hindered. So I think it's better to say that there are actually two factors in the construction of reality. It's the object, that goes without saying, but what the object contains we cannot say, that's implicit. And then we have the subject, and in the interplay in between the subject and the object, reality comes to fore, and that's the presencing. I think reality, even on the object side, has some limits, because without limits there can be no knowledge, there can be no space without limits. Limits and space are working together, and they build up reality. So there are limitations built into space, and the subject is, so to speak, co-acting, is co-creative, and that takes also the creative skill from the subjective, because there won't be, well, as a degree, reality is a degree, but the better you get at creating reality, the more real it gets. It doesn't come passively. A passive perceived reality is not a reality at all. It's an illusion, it's a dream, it's a fantasy. Maybe we can compare this passive idea among the Greeks of observance, theorim, as a person that lie in some drug-induced sleep. He's completely passive, and what he or she is experiencing is say dreamlike state. That's a passive reality. It just comes up to the fantasy. But since there is no intention, there's no acting, working ingredient, that will not be a real reality. And it would be shared less by other people, would be more subjective. It doesn't carry the same value for understanding what is coming to happen. It doesn't have predictive power, so to speak. And that's another problem. Our knowledge of today doesn't have much of a predictive power. We cannot use it to understand what will happen next. We cannot use it to plan our lives, not in weeks, not in months, not in years or decades. It doesn't hold much value. And I think this is something both the postmodernists and people in general have realized. Knowledge is not worth that much. It's the only good thing, it's easy to come by, you can get a degree. How easy? It's ludicrously easy today. That's maybe the only benefit. to be serious. We need knowledge because that enriches our lives. It makes everything worth living for. And chaos theory can heal that. It can heal our knowledge, and it also at the same time open up so many different venues for knowledge. It's like opening up the line, the horizontal line I think Kalle mentioned, that is completely 1, 2, 3 in ordinals. And that's opened up by putting some things underneath, some things above. And then of course you can turn that 90 degrees and you can have something in front and you can have something in back. And you can see how it widens now, becomes more and more complex. And this is knowledge. It's always an increase in complexity. And the closest you come to a stable line in chaos theory is development on complexity, otherwise it doesn't have stability. If it doesn't get more complex, it's not progressing. So in a sense, those monosemic fools want to take out the branch that they are themselves sitting on. They are sawing it off because lack of understanding sort of shuts their own knowledge off from the very start of the branch. So fractals are actually quite soothing to look at, to understand that everything in this world is at base fractal. It's not linear. It is not a narrow line. And it's a sort of deconstructing the horizontal line that doesn't really exist in the world. In a fractal line, everything comes at the same time, but also in sequence. But that sequence is three-dimensional, and that is much more encompassing, and I would say informative, gives more knowledge, more understanding what it's about. And it's a little bit like I mentioned in the previous lecture, because of the fractal nature of movement. One singular movement can contain the whole universe of information. So the iteration principle doesn't acknowledge scale, one could say, because the smallest thing contains everything. And although William Blake was poetic, he said that in a grain of sand you can see the whole universe. It's literally true. This is how it works in reality. The smallest thing, everything subsides, everything inhabits the smallest, and the smallest shows the biggest, because the biggest is an effect of the smallest. Well, I think I'll round up there by closing up the library, and it's time to go back home to have a nice evening, relaxing from quite a strenuous day at the library. And I show you some bit of the evening sky. Well, I don't think you can see through the window, but thank you very much and have a good night. Bye bye.